Observe a man in a state of absolute, unbridled fury. He is leaning forward, his mouth wide as he shouts into a courtroom microphone. And yet you hear nothing. Just a few feet away, a judge sits in total silence, unaffected by the outburst. This tension defined the 2022 trial of the state of Wisconsin versus Darrell Brooks. The proceedings were heavy with the weight of the charges. Brooks was on trial for a mass casualty event that had devastated the local community, resulting in multiple deaths and dozens of life-altering injuries. Before the trial could even begin, Brooks made a decision that would dictate the entire rhythm of the case. He chose to waive his constitutional right to an attorney, opting to represent himself against a team of veteran prosecutors. In doing so, he attempted to move the trial away from standard legal defense and toward a narrative he alone controlled, setting the stage for a confrontation between his personal rules and the court's authority. To navigate this, Brooks relied on a fringe ideological framework that has been used to disrupt courtrooms across the country for decades. He identified as a sovereign citizen. Adherents of this movement believe they are exempt from the vast majority of government laws, taxes, and regulations, viewing the legal system as an optional contract they never signed. This ideology claims a court has no jurisdiction unless a person expressly consents. Throughout the proceedings, Brooks claimed he was a flesh-and-blood human being, separating himself from the legal person in the prosecution's documents. It is a strategy of weaponized definitions, designed to overwhelm the judge and jury with circular logic, until the legal process simply grinds to a halt. Testing this strategy in a high-stakes mass casualty trial forced the legal system to maintain order without violating the defendant's rights. For weeks, the courtroom became a site of constant friction. Brooks acted as a source of deliberate chaos, while the bench remained the anchor of the law. Brooks' tactics were repetitive. He would interrupt testimony to argue the definitions of common words and demand that the judge provide physical evidence of her official oath of office. These interruptions were designed to provoke a reaction. By baiting the judge into an argument or a loss of temper, he hoped to demonstrate that the court was biased or unstable. Judge Jennifer Dorow responded with a neutrality that proved impenetrable. She refused to raise her voice, meeting every outburst with the same calm, level tone. She adhered strictly to procedure, recording each of his objections, explaining the relevant statutes for the record, and then methodically overruling him. By refusing to engage emotionally, the court demonstrated that the law is not a conversation to be won, but a process that continues regardless of the defendant's volume. As his pseudo-legal arguments failed to stall the trial, Brooks shifted toward physical disruption, shouting over the judge and the witnesses to prevent anyone else from being heard. Judge Dorow eventually invoked her authority to remove the source of the disruption. Brooks was physically moved out of the main courtroom. He was placed in an adjacent room where he could still watch the proceedings via a monitor, but his only means of speaking to the court was through a single microphone. Even in this second room, Brooks continued to shout his sovereign citizen theories, attempting to use the microphone to broadcast his protests over the trial's actual evidence. This behavior led to the use of a simple soundboard control. When Brooks refused to stop his interruptions, Judge Dorow cut the audio feed. This created the trial's most lasting image, a man shouting with all his strength while the world watched him in total silence. He was reduced to a pantomiming figure on a screen, unable to impact the progress of the law. The moment highlighted a core reality. His power to disrupt was a privilege granted by the system he claimed to reject. Once that privilege was revoked, his influence vanished. The trial eventually moved past the theatrics and into the hands of the jury. The sovereign citizen arguments offered no protection against the evidence presented by the state. After reviewing the facts, the jury returned with 76 separate guilty verdicts, covering every count brought against him. Judge Dorow handed down a sentence of multiple consecutive life terms without any possibility of parole. The flesh-and-blood man who believed his words could bypass the law was now permanently confined by the very system he insisted had no power over him. The case of Darrell Brooks stands as a study in how extreme narcissism reacts when confronted by an immovable institution. Brooks operated on the belief that the legal system was a series of linguistic loopholes that could be bullied into submission if he simply spoke louder and longer than everyone else. He learned that while volume can capture attention,
it cannot change the facts. Justice remained unshakable, and the loudest voice in the room was eventually and permanently silenced.